We start with the government's long-awaited clampdown on extremism. And today, Michael Gove has named 5 groups, including 3 Muslim organisations, that would be investigated over extremism fears. Well, I'm joined now in the studio to chat over this by GBNews' political editor Christopher Hope and Donna Jones, who's the chairwoman of the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, and she really knows her onions. Chris, let's start with you. We've been waiting for this since Rishi Sunak did that emergency address. You were there at Downing Street. It was broke.
You were on air then too.
Broke during this show. And what struck me at the time was this conflation of a tangible, provable, very real Islamist growing threat, booming anti-Semitism on the streets of Britain, and then this far-right threat. And we said at the time, OK, so what is the far-right threat? What quantity is it? Who are the groups? Today we found out, and it's fair to say it was a bit underwhelming. One of the organisations hasn't existed since 1968. That's a British national movement, which was known as the British National Socialist Movement. They were driven out of town by a communist riot in London in the 1960s. The other one, Patriotic Alternative, well, one of their mob was jailed for racist stickers last Friday. So what I'm putting to you, Chris, is how far did we get today in as far as identifying a tangible, provable threat to the public?
Well, we have heard, and good afternoon, Martin. We have heard, haven't we? They have named 5 different groups: 2 from the far right, 3 from the left: the Muslim Association of Britain, Cage, and Mend, along with the Patriotic Alternative, along with the British National Socialist Movement, which you say hasn't existed since the 60s. They'll look at all those 5, they will tell us, and weigh up whether these are extremist or not. This is an attempt, I think, by the government to get ahead of what is a burgeoning problem since October the 7th. It may be that the issue with Islamism has risen because of the crisis is driven by the Middle East at the moment, and you have got the issue with the Palestinian marches, you have got the issue of Hamas and Jews, and that's where the centre point is, and we're seeing less about the far right at the moment, and that may be on the right. We don't know. There are things that the MI5 and police know we can't always know right now, but the point is they are trying to build on this issue that this is dividing Britain, tearing us apart, and they're trying to get ahead of it, and I can understand why they're doing it. It's risky to name this short list. In 2 or 3 weeks' time we'll see the full list. I think by then you can judge whether you're right in saying it's really an Islamist problem, not a far right one. OK, Donna Jones, I'm so happy you're in, because you know what this is all about. You're operationally on the ground. You're across this, all the police forces in Britain. Can I ask you, when we look at the relative threats of the far right, the far left, Islamism, where's the hierarchy?
OK, so in terms of the volume of crimes, at the moment we are seeing, protesters and organisations who might be considered to be of the left of centre definitely are the ones who are committing more of the crimes and obviously the protests that are happening. I think what Michael Gove has done today is he's speaking out on behalf of the everyday man and woman in this country, the moderate people of Britain, and he's saying, enough's enough. The government need to have a stance on some of these extremes that are happening in society. And I think the reference to the far right, there has been a small increase in the far-right behaviour, but let me just quantify this for you. Over the last 2 to 3 years, in my own force, for example, I would say that there has been probably around 10 incidents on the far right in my patch in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. Around 10.
And what kind of things were they? Do you mind me asking?
Mostly protests in counteracting a pro-Palestinian protest, for example, when they know that there's going to be some people perhaps of an extreme nature there.
So it wasn't like attacks on mosques or physical attacks
it's been
on Muslims?
In response to another protest.
OK.
And they've been largely peaceful and there haven't been a huge problem. The volume of the protests that have happened perhaps in the more moderate centre and to the left, clearly we're seeing those happening much more frequently. I think the key thing here is that people have a right to freedom of speech.
Yeah.
You even it's not illegal to have thoughts of an extreme nature. What the government are trying to say here, they're not bringing in new legislation today. What Michael Gove is clearly saying is that if you try and insinuate or you try and encourage, I should say, any kind of division, any kind of break-up of community cohesion, if you are promoting or you are an organisation that's promoting hate crimes in Britain today, it's not right, it's got to stop, and clearly the government are concerned about extremes in society growing.
OK, cool. Let's have a quick listen to what Michael Gove said earlier at that announcement in Parliament.
The United Kingdom is a success story. A multinational, multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy, stronger because of our diversity. But our democracy and our values of inclusivity and tolerance are under challenge.
So we hear that phrase a lot, we're stronger through our diversity, but we are becoming very divided along lines of religion, ostensibly. That's what this is about since October the 7th, isn't it? This is an issue ostensibly, correct if I'm wrong, between those who are pro-Palestine and the Jewish people. And then we have the hard left coming in, and as you said, the far right, whatever you want to call them, counter-protesting. And that's why we're seeing an uplift generally. But on the balance of probabilities, the greatest threat is from where?
I would say in terms of the volume of the two extremes, it's coming from the left in terms of the volume. But what you tend to find, whilst they are much more infrequent in terms of the far right, they actually can often be slightly more violent. But actually, the volume of things that are going on are coming more from I would say, from left of centre and from the far left. But what we do have to remember is, let's just take, for example, these protests in London every 2 weeks, these pro-Palestinian protests, OK? The vast majority, 99% of the people that are there are lawful. They turn up with lawful intentions. They're exercising their right to freedom of speech. However, and it's always the minority that cause the problem, and the minority who are from the far left on those protests every 2 weeks in London, they are the ones that are potentially damaging this for all of those lawful people that want to be there exercising their right to a ceasefire in Gaza, let's say.
Just to be absolutely clear, so if a young British Muslim lad clambers on a war memorial, is that classified as a left-wing crime, or is that something different?
I mean, it depends on the context of it, but I would say no. I think that if you are chanting a hate slogan on a protest outside a mosque, or you're saying from the river to the sea, and you are chanting that when you know that there are Jewish people around, or it's chanted in a way that is due to cause you're intending to cause offence, of course that's a hate crime. Whether that would be deemed far left or not, you'd have to speak to the police about that. I'm a police and crime commissioner. I oversee the governance of policing and set the strategy and the policy for my force, but obviously that is an operational police officer's call on whether or not that would be deemed to be far left or not.
No, I'm extremely grateful for you setting this out, because I just think we want some clarity, don't we? I think people just want clarity.
And it shows to me how hard it is to enforce the law, because we've had people on air, haven't we, here saying, why can't the government take control of the policing, or why were the police standing by? And those words were put on the Big Ben column. You saw the actual projector, Martin, and you on Twitter you were saying, why is it there? Why is the police not throwing
14 minutes on Parliament Square on the Green, and I actually went to the meeting at number 10 on the Wednesday afterwards, chaired by the Prime Minister, and of course that came up in conversation. Why was from the river to the sea?
Why was it? We don't know.
Well, I mean, there was no one manning it. It was put up, the projector, on the grass. It was there. It projected for 14 minutes before it was removed.
I went over and said to the coppers, "There's the projector. Go and nick them." They had no interest.
But why didn't they nick them?
Well, I think the investigation is ongoing as to who put it there, who pushed the button, who was responsible. But of course, those sorts of things.
Well, they could have found that if they'd come over with me, because I showed them the video. They had no interest on it. And before we move on, we have to have a quick look at what Sir Keir Starmer said about this earlier.
I think the debate about extremism has to be taken very, very seriously. Because there hasn't really been a review of extremism now for a number of years. There are new threats, and it is important, therefore, that we all come together to look at the question of extremism and what action is now needed. What I would say is that this will only work if it is truly cross-party and not divisive, and that's the spirit in which I want to enter this discussion in relation to extremism.
And Donal Jones, you were nodding vociferously there at what Sir Keir Starmer was saying. This only works if everybody buys into it. Well,
look, I don't very often agree with Sir Keir Starmer. I'm a Conservative. But actually, on this point, he's absolutely bang on the money. It has to be cross-party. Any division here is not helpful. And actually, we saw Amber Rudd, Sajid Javid and Priti Patel, 3 of our 4 previous Home Secretaries, put out a joint statement yesterday saying just what Sir Keir Starmer has said. It has to be together. No political division here. Let's get behind it. He's absolutely right. We need it for the safety of Britain.
Hallelujah. What a fantastic first guest you've been, Donna Jones. Please come back.
I will.
I don't reckon that was just brilliant.
Well, clarity, because what a lot of people have been worrying our viewers and listeners is why can't the police enforce the law? And you're describing, or trying to describe, how hard that can be. And that's really fascinating from hearing from you, Donna.
Great stuff. Love it. Thank you very much. Please come in again.